Good evening, and welcome to the August 14th Cross Lake City Council meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first thing on the agenda tonight is the additions, and they include some additional bills, but that will be under the consent calendar, a letter regarding repurchasing our lots, and a letter regarding the ISO, which is a insurance service office from the fire department, and Mike will address that in his administrative report. So is there a motion on the floor from the council to approve the additions to the agenda?
I'll make that.
Gary Hecox first and a second.
I'll second.
Brad Nelson second. All those in favor of the addition, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Then we have the consent calendar, and all of the items on the consent calendar are available on the website. So if you want to see what we look at each month before our meetings, you can go there. But we need a motion on the floor, and the items on the consent calendar will be all addressed in that one motion. So can I have a motion on the floor to accept the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion.
Brad Nelson first, and a second.
I'll second that.
Dave Schrupp. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Under critical issues, we have Ann Antonsen from Springstead, and this is regarding the presentation of classification and compensation study as it relates to our employees here at Cross Lake. So, Ann, at this time, would you like to address the council and the audience?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, staff that are here, and others. My name is Ann Antonsen, and I am a Vice President and Consultant with Springstead. Can everybody hear me okay? And we were hired by the City of Cross Lake to conduct a classification and compensation study. And tonight we are presenting preliminary results of the study for your review and any questions that you have about the process or some of the findings and the recommendations that we have. In your council packet, we had a study summary that was included that provided an overview of the study, and I'd like to go through that with you this evening. So Springstead started this study in the fall of 2016. We did the original employee kickoff meetings with the city back in October for starting the study. And at that project initiation, we met with department heads to become familiar with the organization. We met with administration to talk about issues and concerns that the city had for conducting the classification and compensation study, gathering some background information that we would use for the various phases of the study, and becoming familiar with the City of Cross Lake, your structure, your services, and some of the issues that you faced and concerns that department heads may have had with the compensation or benefit levels of any employees within the organization. Then we had a group meeting with all employees to identify for them the objectives that the city had identified for conducting the study, the process that we would be utilizing for the study, their participation in that process, and how we would use the information that they provided. It was also an opportunity for any staff to ask any questions that they had, express any concerns that they had regarding the study. At those meetings, we distributed what we call PAQs, or position analysis questionnaires, and these were to be completed by all employees and their supervisors. The purpose of this questionnaire was to provide us information to use in developing new job descriptions for all positions to ensure that they were accurate for what the current essential job functions of positions were, what the current job requirements were for positions as far as education, experience, any certifications, and also identify ADA compliance. So what are the working conditions, what are the physical demands of positions? So those PAQs were completed by employees. Then they were given to supervisors who provided input without changing any employee information. And then we used that document for different phases of the study. One of those was to, again, develop new job descriptions. The second purpose of that was to assist us in collecting market survey data for positions, so trying to compare similar positions out in the marketplace. And then we also used it for reviewing internal relationships of positions within the organization. That is something that is required in the state of Minnesota under local government pay equity, but it's also the tool that assists an organization in determining where positions should be laid out in the organization's compensation plan. This is especially important because you don't always get valid market comparisons for every position because it might be unique to your organization. So that job evaluation or internal review is how we determine placement of those positions. So it was a very important part of that process. So as a part of this, we developed new job descriptions. Then we used that information to start our market survey. We wanted to wait until 2017 to start that market survey to make sure that we were getting the most up-to-date data rather than collecting 2016 data, which would already be aged as we started the study. We wanted to wait until 2017. It took us a little while to collect all that data because we had some organizations, many that didn't respond to our survey, so we needed to wait until the league survey came out because you get a lot more responses, and that information becomes available around May, depending on how quickly people respond to that survey. So then we took that market survey data, we analyzed that data, and we developed the preliminary recommendations that we have brought to you this evening. So when we did our market survey, on page 2 of the study summary that we have for you is a listing of the cities that we included in the survey. There were 25 public sector organizations that were included, and they were selected based on a variety of factors. One was conversations that I had with department heads regarding who they saw as their market comparisons, so who they consider themselves comparable to, who's providing a similar level of services, who's structured similarly, who's facing some of the same issues, who's competition for employees. So those were some of the factors. Then we brought in some other cities to ensure that we had, a valid group of comparisons for the majority of city positions. You do have a couple of positions that are fairly unique, which we weren't able to collect valid market data on, but a good cross-section. The other factors that are taken into consideration is size, geographic location, organizational structure, and types and level of services that are provided. So we had those 25 cities. We were able to collect information from 24 of the 25. City of Paynesville, they didn't respond to the league survey or to our requests. It's pretty difficult to get 100% participation, so 24 out of 25 is a very, very good response rate. So of those cities, we collected salary range information and actual wages for positions. So we wanted to know what the starting wage was for each position, if they had one, what the midpoint was, and what the maximum rate, so the top rate of pay available to employees. You know, in the city of Cross Lake, not all of your positions have an established salary range. So you'll see when we go over the market survey information, we compared the current wages for those positions to the average minimum, midpoints, and maximums. So you could see where your current salaries fell in relationship to the salary ranges in other organizations. So that's where you see that comparison. So if we look at the survey results of the positions that we included, we had all city positions were included in the survey. We had information was not provided for one position in the analysis of the data, so you can see that that is basically blank in the survey in the appendix at the back of the report. And then we had one other position that was excluded from the overall analysis because the information received was either deemed incomplete, so not enough responses, or inconsistency in the responses. So the information provided was either not consistent with the position in the city of Cross Lake and not consistent with the responses that we received. So when we looked at that analysis of the survey data, and the details are in Appendix 1 of the survey, where you can see where the positions are listed. So we have the positions that were included in the survey. Then the next column is the number of responses that we received for each position, and you can see they vary from none up to a high of 24 responses for positions, with an average of just over 11 responses. So that's a very good number of responses with which to draw conclusions and relationships relative to the market. So we have the list of positions, the number of responses. The next column is the average midpoint of the salary ranges that were reported by the survey respondents. Then for minimum salaries, what the low and the high minimum was per position. Then the average minimum. Then low and high midpoint. And then for maximum salary, again, the lowest, the highest, and the average maximum salary for each position. The one that you see highlighted in blue with a DNU, that's the position that we did not use the information in the overall analysis because there was no consistency in the types of positions that were reported. So then if we go down to the next chart right below, this is how the salary survey information compared to your current either ranges for those positions that have a designated range or actual salaries for those positions that just have a set salary and no established range. So we look at the minimum salary, how that compared to the market dollar-wise, and then how it compared percentage-wise. Then the same for midpoint and maximum. And as you can see, when you look at the minimums, a lot of your positions are over the minimum, but that's based on their actual salary. And you have some employees that have been in their positions for a longer period of time, so you would expect their minimums to, their actual wage to be above the market minimums. And then we do have a couple of positions that are below market. Then as we start to move up towards the midpoint and the maximum comparisons, you start to see there be a change in how those salaries compare out in the marketplace. You still have, you know, a number that are above the market midpoints with their actual salary, but then when we get to the maximum salary, you can see that every position, either the maximum of their range or their current actual salary, is below the market maximums. So you can see down below, on average, those salaries are about 5.5% above market minimums, 0.71% below market midpoints, and 7% below the maximums. So, and then down below is just a figure excluding those positions that were using just the actual wage rate for the comparison. So this is just looking at those positions that have a specified range for the comparison to the market. And you can see that those that have a specified range, their starting wage is fairly significantly below the market. So we took that information and collected that. Then the next piece, while we were collecting the market data is when we looked at the internal relationships, and that's looking at job evaluation. And this is on page 3 of your report. If you look about halfway down the page, it talks about developing a salary schedule. So this uses salary survey and then internal relationships. To evaluate city positions for internal relationships, we used what's called the SAFE Job Evaluation System, which stands for Systematic Analysis and Factor Evaluation System. This is a job evaluation system that was developed specifically for use in the public sector. It is a copyrighted system. It's a system that's been tested in federal court under an EEOC claim in a county in Georgia and been found to be an equitable tool for evaluating the relationships of positions within an organization. It's also been accepted by the state of Minnesota under their local government pay equity. So the factors that are included in the SAFE Job Evaluation System, it's a very comprehensive evaluation system. The state, under their legislation that was passed in the mid-'80s, only has 4 factors that are required to be included in the evaluation. Our system has 9, so it's a very comprehensive system, and it's what allows an organization to compare very different jobs to one another within the organization. So, you know, a position that works in the office to one who's working in public safety to one who's working in your public works department because of the variety of factors. So those factors include training and ability, which looks at both formal education as well as any special requirements. So if the position is required to have a certification or a license, which takes a significant amount of training and some testing, but does not result in a degree, that's also included in this factor in the evaluation. It looks at the prior work experience that's required of the position. And one thing to keep in mind when we look at job evaluation looks at requirements of position, not the qualifications of the individual in the position. So what does the city of Cross Lake require of its positions? So prior work experience, level of work, so of the type of work being done, is it entry level on up to a management level of that type of work? Human relations skills, which looks at the responsibility of the position for working with or through others, both within and outside of the organization, and then what's the frequency and what's the purpose of those contacts. Looks at the physical demands, working conditions, which takes into consideration both the extent of hazardous or disagreeable environmental conditions that an employee faces in their job, and it also looks at the level of mental effort or stress that is required of the position. Another factor is how independently the position is either allowed or required to work, so looking at the level of supervision received, so how much contact, how much direction is an employee receiving from their supervisor. Then impact on end results, the types of decisions that are required to be made by an employee, actions that are required to be taken, what's the impact on the organization, and what's the level of consequences associated with those. And then supervisory responsibilities of the position. So those are the 9 job factors that were taken into consideration for evaluating positions. So we took that evaluation, we took the market survey data, and then we developed the proposed compensation plan. I believe the last page in your study summary is this graph that's right here. This is just a simple regression analysis which looks at the job evaluation points of the positions and the market average wage. So the dots along the line is where the position points and the market survey data cross, and the line is then a kind of a proposed pay line. And so this is the guideline for developing the compensation plan for this. So when we took this data and then ran that through, and when we developed our compensation plan, the proposed compensation plan has 20 pay grades. There is a 6% spread between pay grades all along the scale. There's 9 steps in each grade with a 3% spread between steps. Now, the goal of the proposed pay plan is to design a plan where the starting wage is competitive out in the marketplace, so it's comparable to what the starting wage is in similar organizations, a competitive midpoint and a competitive top rate, so that all of the steps along the scale are designed to be consistent with the marketplace. And so that's why you see the structure with the 9 steps and the 3%, because the goal of that is to make sure that the whole scale is then consistent with the market. So we designed that pay plan, and then each position was assigned to the pay plan based on the comparison to the market and based on their job evaluation points under the SAFE system. So the proposed pay plan is in Appendix 2 of the report. So we show the pay plan, and again, the 20 grades with the 9 steps. And then down below that is a listing of the city's positions and where they fall within that pay plan. And for space-saving purposes, we're only showing the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum. But each of those would fall into the step system above. Now, this is showing both union and non-union employees. Your union employees currently do have contracts that are settled. This shows where they would fall if they were falling under this compensation plan, but any changes with your union employees, of course, would have to be negotiated with their bargaining unit. But it shows where they would fall, and it's designed, again, for all employees, regardless of whether they're union or non-union, fit in the pay plan to ensure that their starting, their midpoint, and their top salaries are consistent with the market. So that's the listing of positions. Then we took individual staff members and put them within the pay plan and looked at, okay, where do they fall in relationship to the current, to the proposed compensation plan, and what would it cost, excuse me, to move employees into the pay plan. So if you look at this page of your report that's got these couple other charts, this is preliminary implementation options based on these preliminary recommendations. And the 2 options that we have identified, option 1 is looking at those employees who have a current wage which falls below the proposed minimum of the range assigned to their position, and that is 3 of your 16 employees have a wage that falls below that minimum. The annual cost, and this is just wages only, to move them to minimum is just over $12,000, or about 1.5% of the city's payroll. Option 2 then takes the remaining 13 employees who have a wage which falls somewhere between the minimum and the maximum and puts them on a specific step within the system. And it moves them onto the step closest to their current wage without any employee seeing a decrease in pay. So all movement is upward. So for those 13 employees, to move them onto a specific step is just over $14,000. So the total cost of the 2 options is $26,572, which is just over a 3% increase in the city's payroll. So what this does is it creates a proposed compensation plan that is consistent and competitive out in the marketplace and internally equitable for all positions. So that was the goal and objective of this, was to develop an equitable, competitive compensation plan. And at that, I will stop and open it up for questions. I know lots of information.
Does any of this take into account their benefits, or is it
The-
just strictly pay?
This right here is strictly pay. We did somewhat of a review of the benefits. It's getting harder and harder to compare benefits, especially health insurance, because everybody is offering great variations in pay plans, great variations in deductibles, and it's getting really hard to compare those. Most times with other benefits, as far as, vacation, sick leave, those types of things, most organizations are pretty consistent. There's a little bit high here, a little bit low here, but not great variations in the overall benefits.
Dave, Nevin, do you have any questions at this point?
Trying to process it.
Brad?
Does it take into account, I see the listing of the cities, and most of them, some of them I'm very familiar with. Many of them, of course, I know where the cities are, but, we have a little bit of an anomaly here. There is a few cities listed in there, Nisswa, Walker, et cetera, that we have the huge spikes in population. You just can't compare us to a normal 2,200 person city. So, but in looking at your list, I kind of answered my own question, but, just asking you, when you do these plans, you look at like these tourist communities where we just boom like crazy for 4 months a year and put a lot of stress on a lot of departments, that, they don't see, the other, say, 7.5 months of the year, we've got that going on here that's quite unique compared to just a normal city, but I see that there are a few others listed that are, like us in that category.
Yeah, and we tried to take that into consideration. That was some of the conversations that we had with administration and department heads when we started this study, is that you do have that great influx of people coming to your community in the summer. So we tried to pick out other communities that might be similarly situated. It's difficult to find a community that's exactly like yours, so we try to pull in those types of communities, and then realizing that some of the other cities that were included, when we do the analysis of the data, we do a very detailed data point by data point. So just because we had a city that was listed on here, if they provided a salary information that really wasn't a fit either to the city of Cross Lake or to the other survey participants, or, based on our knowledge of some of the concerns that you have, we pull that out of the analysis. So if there's something that really was not a fit, we pulled it out. So if something was, say if your salary range was $42,000 to $52,000, and we had somebody else came in that had a salary range of, maybe $35,000 to $42,000. That's way at the low end. We'll pull that out of the analysis and not include that in the overall data for making recommendations. So we do take that into consideration, realizing that not anything is going to be an exact match to you.
Dave Schrupp, do you have any questions?
One comment on the mention of preliminary. What does that mean?
This is for review at this point, to see if you have any comments. We have this listing of cities and this analysis, so there was some discussion of, do we need to add or drop off any of the communities that are on this list to be a better representation for the city of Cross Lake? Because as we just said, you're very unique. And we tried to pull that in. But, sometimes, when we get to this stage, somebody says, well, you know what, we really should have added this community. We really want to see what would happen if we add them. Does it really change any of the study results? Or we'd like to see this community pulled off because we don't think that all in all they're representatives. So that's why it's preliminary at this point. Just any feedback from the city council as to whether you would like to see anything different as a part of that analysis.
Are we going to have another meeting to
well,
talk about this, given this information was
I was thinking that since it's going to be part of our budget discussions, that we add this to our budget meeting next Monday evening. And in the meantime, we can digest this more as a council. For any questions, we can talk with Mike and go from there. So I guess my recommendation would be not to entertain a motion tonight accepting this, but to table it indefinitely and then come back after we've had further discussion.
I do have one question, if I could. A government employee, is there a range that the pay scale kind of is restricted to?
The only thing that restricts it in the state of Minnesota is the salary cap that we've got, because salaries can only reach a certain percentage of the governor's salary unless you file for a waiver. That is the only, And the other restriction in Minnesota is you have to be able to file a pay equity report that meets the standards identified by the state under their pay equity legislation. Otherwise, there are no restrictions on pay for public employees.
So it would be up to this body they could raise or lower anybody's pay within reason? I mean, is that,
As long as you have an equitable compensation program and a compensation plan that allows you to recruit and retain qualified employees within the organization, which is getting harder and harder to do.
but at our last meeting, wasn't that kind of said that we're governed by, you can only pay them so much? Somebody told me that. Because it's a government employee. Doesn't ring any bells? Okay.
So are you saying we don't have a equitable pay plan
Well,
yet?
you have a lot of positions where you just have a set salary. There's not really any room for growth for an employee once they start in a position and gain experience and move in. There's nothing that says, okay, if we hire somebody into this position, this is a starting wage that is competitive out in the marketplace, and here's where they can go to at the top of their range to be competitive with the market. So what you have in place, yes, there can be issues with internal equity depending on who you have hired in a position at a certain time, and also that ability to determine where a position should be paid relative to other positions and relative to the market. So you don't have a consistent compensation program.
All right. Can you, let me just, I'm used to working in the private sector, and that's pretty much one-on-one. And it's my understanding that when we, at least for salaried employees here, every year, when there's an increase, everyone gets the same increase. Has that kind of been the case?
That's pretty much, well, not always.
Not always. But does that have to be the case?
If you maintain compliance with pay equity, nobody would really question it, but this is designed to give you a program where you would be in compliance with pay equity and identify where you would hire somebody into a new position. So if your city clerk would leave, if your new city administrator were to leave, you would have a pay range that would identify, okay, this is the market range for a city clerk position. So if we're going to hire somebody and we hire somebody that only meets our minimum qualifications, we would hire them at step one, of course, pending current market conditions when you're hiring somebody. But after they accumulate years of service, it identifies a process and a program for you to move them through the wage scale rather than just an annual cost of living. So it's designed to give you that ability to identify, okay, in the long term, with this job evaluation system that you have, if the city chooses, we train you on how to maintain that job evaluation system. So if you create a new position within the city, you have the ability to evaluate it, you have job points, and you can say, okay, we have a new position, the job value is 170. Where does it fit in our pay plan? And you can go through here and say, oh, 170 points fits in a grade 4. So it takes kind of the guesswork out of, where do we fit any new positions or any positions that change. If you have positions that take on new responsibilities, there's significant changes in their job, any requirements, again, evaluation, and then it gives you clear direction as to where that position fits in your compensation plan.
Did you share the survey that you sent out to the respective towns with Mike or anybody? And I don't know if it's important, but I just thought it would be kind of interesting, for my own self to find out what the questions are that you ask them.
Questions were regarding pay plan, and then just for positions, just salary ranges. What's the starting pay,
Okay.
what's the midpoint,
So
what's the top?
So not their responsibilities for that particular job?
No, we showed what
Okay.
your responsibilities were, but we have a hard enough time getting responses, so if we ask them to tell us what all their jobs are.
Right.
We ask for, do they have a different job title or things like that? And we also provide the opportunity to comment, so they can comment if okay, we have a position that's similar, but ours requires a bachelor's degree, or ours, is similar, but it doesn't supervise any employees because it's a department of one.
Yeah. The only reason I ask that question is because, because of what was said earlier, we are a diverse community as far as population.
Yes.
And so, some of our employees may have extra duties compared to somebody else in the same position in another community, simply because of the type of community we're in.
And that's where the job evaluation comes into place, because then we're evaluating the position on specifically what you require and what the needs are in the city of Cross Lake.
Yep, good.
And that also helps us then with analyzing that market survey data, because we can say, okay, our knowledge of this position, because we've done hundreds and hundreds of these studies, so we're pretty familiar with what a typical position is required to do. So if we see that, a position is unique, we use that as part of our data analysis and analyzing the market survey information.
Okay, good. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ann?
Having done hundreds and hundreds of these, as you just stated, I'm just curious, at the bottom line, you say we're basically within 3%. How does that compare to what you normally find?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That means that, you have, at least, been paying somewhat of attention as to what's going on in the marketplace and in negotiating your contracts and things like that, and that your current wages, what it shows is that your current wages are not that far off of market. I've gone in and done these studies before where, I've seen places that are 20% across the board below the market, and it costs them significant amounts of money. I think the most I've ever had is we had one project several years ago. It was a big city in Maryland, kind of within commuting distance of DC. And the impact on their budget was $4.5 million.
Good, good.
What I see with the cities that are listed here, the city of Cross Lake has a huge population. You've got some cities in here that have huge populations that have much more responsibilities than what we have here. I don't know how you compare, how you bring that all in.
Well, it's, years of analyzing data and pulling in, this responsibility, because some positions, even though it might be a much larger community, some positions have the same responsibilities regardless of the size of the community. They just sometimes have more staff to deal with the larger community.
Yep.
Other positions, because of the size of the community, they are a little bit more unique, but that's how we take that detailed analysis and say, okay, this position probably in that community has a significantly higher level of responsibility than the position in Cross Lake, so we include that as part of our analysis and deciding on what we're going to use.
Any other questions for Ann? And so does the council agree that we should postpone our decision tonight and move it to the budget agenda on this coming Monday?
Yep.
Okay,
I do.
so therefore there will be no motion on the floor this evening. Thank you. That was
My
very
pleasure.
helpful.
Great,
We'll all write down our questions and give them to Mike and he can call you.
absolutely. I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next one under critical issues is Cindy Mugato. And Heather Jones.
Critical.
Good evening, Council. We're just here tonight to bring you up to speed on Cross Lake Days. We're planning it for September 28th through 30th. Heather Jones is the chair of the Cross Lake Days Event Committee, so she'll give you the details. Good evening. As Cindy said, the event takes place September 28th to the 30th, and we're really excited to announce that Crosswoods Golf and Whistling Wolf Mini Golf is our major sponsor this year. We'll be selling the chili bead necklaces again with deals all around town. Some of the highlights are the Lost Chili Pepper Hunt, which has its first clue that comes out on Thursday, first of 3 daily clues. On Friday, the Light Up the Dam is doing a fundraiser with their drive-by brat sale again, and there's an outdoor movie at the campground. We're going to be showing Grease this year, and we're encouraging people to come in costume, so that should be a fun night. Saturday, there's a lot of stuff going on around town. There's an outdoor arts and crafts stuff at the Exchange Lot and at the new school site, and there's indoor crafts at the Cross Lake Lutheran Church. We have our car, truck, motorcycle, and tractor show in Town Square, the chili cook-off, which will begin at noon. Cross Lake firefighters have an open house. There's a disc golf tournament at the community center, cider and candlelight tour at the historic Lodge Village, and a lot of other entertainment around town. So more formally, I do need action on this motion to give permission for the Cross Lake Chamber of Commerce to organize a Chili Fest in Cross Lake on Saturday, September 30th, 2017, as per Minnesota State Department of Health regulations.
I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Critical motion.
Yes. And under, our next one is Tad Erickson with Region 5 and National Joint Powers Alliance to give us an update on the comprehensive plan.
All right, thank you very much. My name's Tad. I'm with the Region 5 Development Commission. And as you know, we're working on updating the city's comprehensive plan in coordination with the National Joint Powers Alliance. And at our last steering committee meeting, the steering committee asked that I just give a brief update to the council, just kind of point to where we're at in the timeline, and just kind of cover the where we're at. So I do have some handouts that I'll pass around. The first one is basically just a verbal list of tasks that have been completed and those that have yet to be completed, so I'll send that around. The next one is the same information, only in a kind of a project timeline form. And then I'll save the last one for a little later here. But so really, we've been meeting since April. We formed a local task force, planning team, and Ashley from NJPA and myself have been facilitating that group. There's, broadly speaking, the planning process breaks into two broad areas. The first part is a lot of information gathering. So we're asking the planning team a lot of questions. We're doing a lot of community visioning in a lot of different areas. We're looking at housing, economic development, transportation, transit being a part of it. As you mentioned earlier, the seasonal population, the variations in population due to the seasonal nature of the environment that we have here. We're asking questions regarding to that about housing. You know, do we have adequate housing for the year-round residents, the seasonal population, seasonal residents, seasonal workforce? What's the workforce needs? What does Cross Lake look like 15 years from now? What are our issues now? How do we address those? Those are the questions that we're asking, and those are the questions we're wanting to address in the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned, we've been meeting since April. We've had 3 steering committee meetings, April, May, and then we just met in July as well. And in fact, later this week is going to be our 4th steering committee meeting on Thursday morning. And at that meeting, what we're going to be looking at is goals. So we've been doing kind of some analysis. Again, a lot of that information gathering up until this point. We've been doing a lot of community visioning and analysis of the data around those areas that I mentioned. And then at this next meeting later this week, we're going to be starting to develop goals around those issues and around those barriers that the planning team has identified. So goal development, that usually takes 2 meetings. So we'll try to get through it in that meeting. But typically, you're gonna see another steering committee meeting dedicated to goal and policy development. Moving forward from there, then we are also developing, or we have developed a survey that's going to go live actually tomorrow, a community-wide survey that we're going to be sending out to several different community groups all throughout the community. We're going to ask city commissions, all kinds of community organizations to help us get the word out on that. And we'll provide a link. It'll be an electronic survey. We can also have it available in paper form, have it available here in City Hall on the city's website. And we also have a comprehensive plan update website that we're posting all of the meeting summaries and all of the meeting agendas to, and of course, we'll have the survey available there as well. And then, actually, that's the other handout I have is about the survey flyer that we put together. The link is not on here. Tomorrow, we're going to put that link on there, and then the actual survey flyers will have the link that people can type in and go and take the survey with. So, other than that, as far as if you look at the timeline, we're right on schedule. Kind of in the upper area of that timeline, you see those little square boxes. Those indicate the steering committee meetings. As I said, we had one. The last one was in July. On Thursday, we'll have that 4th steering committee meeting, and then we've got 2 more steering committee meetings planned. That can change. There can be more if needed, but at least 2 more steering committee meetings going into the fall and winter. In the fall, we'll be drafting the plan. As I said, we've done a lot of visioning. We're developing the goals now. Then we'll be drafting the plan, and then into December and January, we'll be back here after the steering committee's reviewed it, hoping for adoption and approval. So, with that, I don't want to take up any more time, but if you've got questions, I'd be happy to further the conversation now or later. So.
Does anybody have any questions for Tad?
Not I.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We'll be waiting for the finished product.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you, Ted. On the mayor's report, I'm going to defer that to Leah Hagerston. I'm going to have you give an update on the schools.
I want to make sure I got that link in the paper for the comp plan.
Good. Name and address, please.
Yeah. Oh, I'm Leah Hagerston, and I'm at 35533 Sandpoint Drive, Cross Lake. And Patty asked me to just say that we're having a groundbreaking ceremony for the new school this Saturday, the 19th, from 11 to 2, and we're actually going to have it on site. So we've got Woodside Smith & Olting, High Tech, North American Banking. We just had a couple local banks also decided to participate. I think probably all the banks in town will eventually participate, I'm hoping. So we're going to have pig roast. I think Mike Stone's doing that, and Moonlight Bay is doing that, and we're having live music. Todd Licio's band at the district is playing, and it's in conjunction with the Lions Flea Market. And I think there's going to be a bouncy house and all kinds of fun stuff. Other than that, we have our site plan done for the new school, and we will, we got our schedule from the builder, and we'll hopefully break ground in October and be completed October the following year. We're shooting for MEA 2018 for completion. And we did add community spaces back into the school, which are on Highway 66, which is a fishbowl and expanded solarium. So we are raising our fundraising goals a little bit. And we'll continue to fundraise during construction. So give generously if you haven't already. Thank you.
Right. So there are still raffle tickets for sale?
Yes, good point. The raffle is complete on the 19th. That cute house is we're going to draw the name on the 19th. But you can still buy lake acres, and you can still donate small gifts, large gifts. You can donate from people are doing estates, 5-year giving. Lions just did a really nice gift and are pledging more money for the future, verbally. So it's pretty cool. So thank you again to the city for supporting the project and the conduit loan, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Next is the public forum. No action will be taken on any of the issues raised. If appropriate, the issues will be placed on the agenda of a future council meeting. Speaker must state their name and address. Each speaker is given a 3-minute time limit. So is there anybody who would like to come up and speak at the public forum at this time?
You just can't get enough of this public speaking now, can you? You just love it.
You created a monster. Pat Necco reminded me to say it's at buildtheschool.org to donate. That's buildtheschool.org.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from our audience this evening? If not, we will go on to the city administrator's report.
Okay, thank you. Included in your council packet as item F1 is a proposal for ADA inspection services. And if you remember back at our July meeting, the question came up to was how do we make sure that the businesses that are doing expansions, and how do we know that they're handicap accessible and compliance with the ADA? And what Dan Vogt has provided us just a few days ago was a quote from a gentleman, his name is Tim Kahi, who is interested in providing those services for us as needed. And his rate is $75 an hour and 50 cents a mile. And so just as a refresher, how similar services are provided for inspection services. For example, if somebody needs a septic inspection or a design, the city maintains a list of contractors and shows a prospective builder or developer, hands them the list and says, we can't recommend one, but here's people or companies that do that service. If you'd like us to follow that same process with this type of service, then we can do that. I became aware today of another individual that provides that same service, and we can maintain a list with the planning and zoning folks so that when that need comes up, let's say a restaurant or someone needs that service, our only function would be provide me the compliance certificate, or provide John and Cheryl and Chris Pence a compliance certificate rather than having the city contracting someone to go out and do the inspection. That seems to have worked well for us. So, are there any council thoughts on that process? What you'd like to do?
I think the septic inspection works fine.
Okay.
The question I have on this is that, do our ordinances spell out what this individual's supposed to check against? Have we adopted the Minnesota Health Department or whatever we're talking about here?
I'll have Mr. Pence answer that question.
The ADA portion of that is in the building code, and that is something that is not optional for a city or county to opt out of. So that is already in state law, and we're required by that law to enforce that. So we don't adopt an ordinance.
Just that part, though.
Yeah, we don't adopt any part of it because it's in state law, and it's mandated to cities that we have to
Right.
implement that portion of the law.
Okay.
I have a quick question for you. And this is a little bit off the track, but something I need to understand. Just because you're building a commercial building, no matter what your business is or what kind of commercial building it is, you need to follow?
It depends on the type of commercial building. If it's a cold storage building where you're just using it to store, let's say, equipment, boats, whatever, that type of a thing, that's not required to be ADA compliant. It's the type of business where people are going to be regularly, coming in and out of the building. Those are the types where the
Your
ADA
place would be,
requirements.
Oh, I understand my place. Yeah, I mean, I have general public coming in. I'm
But
referring to more of a...
for storage buildings and that,
But I
those are
mean,
not required to
a
be
company
compliant.
that doesn't have any general public coming through their doors, just their own employees, that has no...
No, I still think that if you're going to be having employees come in, I still think you're going to have to be, an ADA compliant. If the public is there, regardless if it's customer-based or if it's employee-based, that building will still need to be ADA compliant for that. It's the ones that are not typically used by the public on a regular basis, regardless if it's, employees or customer staff, customers coming in to be served by a business.
Okay.
how is it handled right now, Chris?
It's not really being done it's not being done at this point, and it's something that we've identified as an issue that we do need to address, and so going forward, we have to do something. I mean, it's not an option to not continue where we're going, and this is something that needs to be addressed either through the two methods that Mike referenced. My preference would be to maintain a list of the providers and then they would be able to choose who they want, and at the end of the building, they'd provide a certificate to the city saying that, yeah, it does meet that. I've talked to other counties and cities, and typically for those cities and counties that don't have the building code on staff or that they have adopted, that's typically the route that they go, is to basically let people know that these are some people you can contact. There's other people they can, it's not a completely inclusive list. It's basically anybody who's a building inspector through the state or somebody who's a ADA compliance specialist.
So the city now does not require a compliance inspection? And the nuts and bolts of this, you're asking that it's time we do it.
We need to do it.
We need
Yep,
to do it,
Correct.
yeah.
Yep,
So
we do
that's the
need to do
step
it.
we're
Yep,
doing.
we need to step
Yeah.
up, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good. Are there any other questions for either Mike or Chris?
I just have one, Chris. At what point is it a population number where the cities are required to have a building inspector?
Yes, that's a good point.
Like
Anytime
2,600,
that
I
number
heard?
hits 2,500 is where you're required to do, I believe it's 2,500.
And we are at 22?
Let's see.
Sure? Yeah, okay.
I'd have to check that because
All right.
I guess I'd have to check those numbers because for some reason in my
That's
mind,
okay. You don't have to.
5,000 is sticking
Yeah.
in there too, because once you adopt and you're over 5,000, I don't believe you can ever
Undo it?
become an undo it. So I think once you do it,
They
you're,
don't average that, I hope, do they?
no, it's what the population is according to the Census Bureau, so.
Good. Any other questions for Chris or Mike?
So who picks up the cost on this, the city, or does a builder?
Builder.
It'd be the
It's like
builder,
a-
property owner.
It's like a septic inspection.
Yep, it's not a cost to the city at all.
But
With the second option, so.
do we have two options here now, or is it just this Tim? Or is it providing a list?
Well, I think the two options are either pick somebody and then the city pays for it in that scenario, I would think, or provide a list and the builder or
And just require
applicant
them
pays
to
for
get it?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, correct.
I think what I'm hearing you say is you want to go, if we can come up with a list of people that, or businesses that do that, that's the preferred option. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, as long as it's the state recognizes the certificate that they give.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is that what you want, so that's what the motion will be on then? Okay. So the motion on the floor is that we have a list of our builders/developers for when the need arises to contact one of them to be ADA.
A list of a building
Comply.
inspectors. Yep.
Yeah, list of building
So
inspectors.
you made that
I
motion?
guess I
then?
made that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second item on my list under my report is, if you remember back a month or two ago, we approved the sale. We directed the fire chief to try to find a buyer for the hovercraft. If you know anything about hovercrafts, they got an aircraft engine in them, they require inspections, they're very costly to maintain. And so we decided to sell it. The council decided to put it out for bids and sell it. I'm happy to say we found a buyer. It's a small city in western Montana that has a need for our hovercraft. They'll be picking it up sometime in September. With that said, what Chip would like to do with the proceeds, he's asked me to get your approval tonight for him to pursue the acquisition and purchase of a Zodiac-type boat. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's either it's a small boat that's easily maneuverable, 4, maybe 3 people can pick it up and carry it down a hill and launch it. It's basically an inflatable with the motor on it. He would like to purchase one from Great American Marine for just over $13,125 and would like your approval to do that with the proceeds of the
How much did they get for the hovercraft?
$15,000.
Oh, so it covers it, huh?
We took $10,000 in cashier's check, which we've already cashed, and the balance due upon delivery when they pick it up.
Is there a motion on the floor to approve the purchase of a rescue boat?
I'll make that motion.
Brad Nelson first.
Second, I'll second it.
Dave Schrupp. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. Third item on my list is an update on the National Loon Center and a request for the city to act as a pass-through agent for some funding. And what this amount is for is there's a study being done by the University of Minnesota Extension Agency, and they put together a budget and a program to study the overall need to improve the coexistence of people and loons in our shared natural habitat, particularly around here. They'd like to do a research project, and they've received some funding already. They've received some money from the Cross Lakers, the University of Minnesota, NJPA, the Cross Lake Lions, the Train Museum here in Cross Lake, and the Initiative Foundation. And with respect to the National Joint Powers Alliance, they would like to provide funding for that program, but to do that, they need to run it through the city because their charter says we'll donate to cities or provide program funding to government entities within our jurisdiction, of which we are. So what I'd like is a motion for your approval to facilitate that process on their behalf. There's no cost to the city. We're just using it as a vehicle to help them with their program. We're not going to own anything at the end of this. And probably what will happen is in the second semester of the University of Minnesota schedule, they'll be coming back and saying, depending on how that part of the program worked, there is additional funding secured of that same amount, and that amount is $7,680 times 2 for $15,360.
Similar
So-
to what we did for the Ideal Farmers Market.
Yep, similar. So we'll be coming back to you, or Leah will be coming back to you and at a later date and asking for the second half of that program.
The council has not heard about the Loon Center? Is that what that title is going under, or what is it?
This
Or at
is-
least I haven't. I'm not familiar with it, so.
Leah, do you want to come up and give a brief overview of what's been happening with the Loon Center so that the council is, sorry, Mike?
No, that's fine, but while she's coming up here, this part is for the research for, through the University of Minnesota to study the loon population in this area, which is, at some point, will be shared as a document or an exhibit in the Loon Center.
Should we do the motion first?
Yeah, I make the motion. that-
Okay.
I mean, it's a pass-through. I make the
Pass.
motion.
It's a
I'll
pass.
second it.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now, Aaliyah, yeah, why don't you just take 3 minutes and tell the council, what's been happening on the Loon Center a little bit, because it's pretty impressive.
Thank you for doing that. I didn't really understand all the legal stuff, but we have established the National Loon Center Foundation. We're a 501c3, and we did just open a bank account, but we still can't receive those funds, so thank you. So we have basically written to get this started, to get this whole dream started, we wrote a grant to the University of Minnesota to their Regional Sustainable Development Partnership Program. And what they did award us the grant to bring Viraj Tasai, who's an architect from the University of Minnesota, and some of her grad students, which now the grad students are going to be the recipients of the JPA funds, to come up and do scope and scale for the National Loon Center from, we start August 28th, and we should be done sometime around Christmas for that exercise. And then she hands it off to Dr. Bill Gartner and his grad students, which is the second half of that funding for the grad students, and they do the feasibility. We have written another grant to the National Park Service, and we'll find out in October. That goes to Congress to see if they can study the parks and trails surrounding the National Loon Center. And then also the Initiative Foundation, we passed their first round so that they could be working with the Initiative Foundation, the Brainerd Lakes Area Chamber of Commerce, Cindy Migato, and to be the operator and do a business plan. So all this would run until June 1st to see if Cross Lake could support something like the National Loon Center. Partners include hoping to have the facility located at the Corps of Engineers, also to have the Historical Society involved, Train Museum, maybe the Children's Museum that National Joint Powers is doing, and a couple other entities. So it's a pretty exciting project. It's hoping to gain more year-round visitors to our area. Educational tourism is the big buzzword, sustainability. We want to have the Freshwater Institute and hopefully partner for life with the University of Minnesota to help water quality, help our loons. And the next step, once we're past that, is to go to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DNR, and a couple of champions out in D.C. with the Corps of Engineers to hopefully gain bricks and mortar.
Great,
So-
thank you. Cross Lake is on the move. Okay, Mike, we'll let you finish your administrator's report.
Okay, thank you. If I could get Brad to put item F4 up on the overhead. And while he's doing that, what this is this is an update on our ISO rating. And what that means is, those of you that own property or buy property, one thing your insurance agent will ask is, what is your ISO fire rating? And based on that rating is what's used to determine the insurance premium you pay on your property. And so, I'm happy to say that for Cross Lake, the area covered by the Cross Lake Fire Department has been upgraded to a Class 610 rating. I'm sorry. Just pass
Who needs one?
that around.
F1 is all I saw.
Here, Dave.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought everybody had that. So what this is an improvement in the existing fire rating, which is really good for a community like ours without a water system. So what that means is, if you look in the middle of that paragraph where there's some bold print, it means that the previous rating was a 7/10. A rating of Class 6 applies to properties within 5 miles, road miles of the fire station located here in this building. The rating of Class 10 applies to properties that are beyond 5 miles. So the important thing about this is, if you read the bottom paragraph, it says an improved ISO rating can result in lowered insurance premiums. So those of you that are reading this or watch this later may want to contact your agent and ask if that makes a difference on your premium. Okay? So that's a great job by our fire department.
Good.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we'll move on to our commission reports, planning and zoning.
Good evening. I got a few items to discuss with you tonight. The first we have is a preliminary plat and a final plat for the planned community townhomes at Town Square. What you have here is you've got the plat boundaries here. You have County Road 3, you have Swan Drive here, and then you're on the, kind of on the backside of Town Square here. And what you've got are lots here for, basically for townhome development. You have an outlot here, this would be lot number 9, and this would be for park area, and then outlot A is going to be the location of the apartment building. What you've got is that as we go through this process, coming up a week from Friday will be a conditional use permit for the actual, we're going to call them duplexes for the sake of what our ordinance says, but since they're multifamily here, we'll need a conditional use permit for this, and eventually we'll need a conditional use permit for the apartments here. This was heard before the Planning Commission at our meeting back in July, and it was recommended to unanimously approve that, and there were no conditions or stipulations that were applied to that. Just a couple of things I wanted to point out. I was just talking to John Henke, and there's a couple of notes here in the declarations. I just mentioned it to Leah just before I came up here. We just need to update these declarations a little bit about the common area. That's going to be this area right in here where there's going to be that park area. There's just some reference here in definitions about the common areas to be used by the owners and not to be, we need to clarify that's for the public. Also need to clarify again that the common area is open to for public use. That comes up in section 3. And then under section number 2, article 4, talks about the city of Cross Lake maintain that area if the association fails to do so. I don't think that's something that we want to get involved in either with this project. So I still recommend that we can approve the plat as submitted, but before we can sign the plat and get it recorded, I'd want to have these declarations updated so that we'll get that review done to make sure that that's meeting all the requirements as needed. So unless there are any questions for me, I would recommend approval of the preliminary plat as it's been submitted.
Is there a motion on the floor for
Make that motion.
Gary Hecox first, Dave Schrupp second?
I just have a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
I believe page 6, there is an error, just a minor error.
Okay.
I think Charvel, you got that, just
Oh,
for,
yes.
that Dave didn't make any.
Yeah, that was just a carryover typo from a
So
previous.
Dave is-
We switched everybody's sheet out, Dave, besides yours, and you caught it, so good job. You were, we played Where's Waldo, and you won, so, good job, so. yeah.
Okay, so now do we have a second on Gary's?
You had one.
Okay, we had one, okay. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, so the next step now is to approve the final plat of the preliminary plat we just approved. It's a two-step process. And so I think we would just approve that with the condition that the declarations would be updated to reflect what I mentioned earlier. So I would recommend approval of this, of the final plat.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor?
I'll make that motion.
Brad Nelson first,
I'll second.
Gary Hecox second. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, thank you very much. The next item I have on the agenda, I just wanted to give you an update on our floodplain ordinance that was recently approved by the council, and so thanks a lot for the work that the planning commission did in council on getting that ordinance adopted, but just wanted to give you a couple updates, and, you know, once you adopt an ordinance, now the next step is, what does that mean, and what did we do, and what is that going to mean for the folks in Cross Lake? So just as a heads up, this is a letter that we did get from C.O. Strauss, who is the state coordinator for floodplain programs, and this is just a letter saying you're approved. And this is really an important letter because the FEMA floodplain maps go into effect August 15th, and that's tomorrow. And if we hadn't had this ordinance in place, we would no longer be in the National Flood Insurance Program. And that would mean those folks who are currently getting flood insurance would no longer be able to get that discounted rate and would have to get a high, to purchase that outside of the National Flood Insurance Program would be a very high rate. So that's something that's really important to note as to why is it important for us to have this ordinance. Just quick, I'm going to throw up a quick map. It's going to be kind of messy. I did my best to make one real quick before the meeting. But this is the best zoom I could get on our on a GIS because of how I could try to get everything to fit. But everything that you see in green on that map is considered floodplain now by FEMA. And there's a lot. And so there's a lot of people who before this were not in the floodplain, and now they are in the floodplain, and it's going to have an impact on them. And so there's two real impacts I want to just talk about real quick. One is a planning and zoning impact, and the other side is a floodplain, or a flood insurance impact, and what does that mean as far as insurance? So on the planning and zoning side, one of the issues that you have is sometimes the insurance and the planning and zoning side don't always relate to each other as much as you might think they do. So what we have now with this new ordinance and this new floodplain map that comes in, if somebody comes in and wants to do an improvement to their property, they want to build a garage, do an addition to the house, they have to make sure that they are either A, out of the floodplain, and if they are in the floodplain, they have to build to an elevation of the lowest floor of the building to be out of the floodplain. And so basically what we have on this map here is established base flood elevations, and that is the 100-year flood where FEMA sets out those maps and says there's a 1% chance of that property flooding through the 100-year map. The key is that when folks want to build, they have to build 1.5 feet above that base flood elevation. That's referred to as, there's a lot of acronyms here, so I'll just go, it's the regulatory flood protection elevation. And so that means that somebody comes in and currently their cabin right now is in the floodplain, and they want to add on to the cabin or something of that nature, they're going to have to elevate that new addition to meet that elevation. One of the keys that's really important to that is not only do they have to raise that lowest floor, so we're talking, we're talking basement, we're talking crawl space, we're talking just a foundation if you just have a slab on grade. The key to that is that they're also required to build a 15-foot pad out from that structure all the way around on all sides of the addition according to the FEMA rules. There has to be a 15-foot pad around that. And so that is going to be a big change, and it's going
How
to
did
have
they
some...
handle this down in New Orleans, for example?
Well, I think one of the problems that you run into is that when you look at a standard from the federal level, they don't take into it, they're trying to treat everybody on the same basis, on the same level. And so, you know, what you see up on the map there are, you know, lakes. And so we have lake floodplain, whereas down there, they're dealing with more of the ocean and river and that. And so they're trying to kind of make one system that kind of fits everywhere, so.
You're kind of talking doom and gloom for people up here, though, and you think of it relatively.
Well, I don't think it's doom and gloom. I think it's be prepared and to know what's coming across. And so what that means is, take for example, you can build a house and you can be 10 feet from the side yard setback will be the setback. But if you have to elevate your building up, now instead of being 10 feet away, you've got to be 15 feet away or 18 feet away, so you can build your pad and then taper it so you keep your stuff on your own property. And so there will be variances. We've already had one have to come through for this because of that 15-foot pad setback. So, morning, I'm just giving you this information so if people call and ask questions, you're prepared and understand what the new requirements are. And then the final piece of that puzzle is that there needs to be an elevation certificate completed by a surveyor to show that when that lowest floor was built, it is actually at that regulatory flood protection elevation. So there's going to be more steps now to get permits for people that are dealing with these floodplain-related issues. So that's one piece I just wanted to bring up. That's going to be, so one of the first things we look at now when folks come in is turn on that floodplain there, because this is on our GIS. It's online through the county. People can look at it. It's on the free site. You can see if your property is being affected by the floodplain or not. It is going to have a big impact on what people can do. The other piece, too, with that planning and zoning side is that if you have accessory structures, you know, garages or sheds, anything on that line that's over 500 square feet in size, you have to meet that same elevation requirement. If it's less than 500 square feet or less, they consider that an incidental building, and you don't have to meet those requirements, but you do have to flood-proof the building, which means putting in some pressure-related device so if the water comes up, it has a way to move and isn't going to cause pressure on the walls, that sort of a thing. So there's going to be some big changes as to what it's going to take to get permits to do certain things when you're in that floodplain.
And this is a national rule.
It came from the federal government through the state, and then it trickles down to the...
So they don't know that we don't flood here.
Yep, they think they do. They think they do, and so that's the map that they put forward. So a couple things that I'll add on top of that. Inside your packet, I kind of gave you a little fact sheet, and I think it's going to be important to, you know, really just go over that. And this is something that related more along the lines to the insurance piece. So if you have a mortgage on your property, banks are required to require flood insurance if they think that your property is in the floodplain. And so what happens, what's going to happen, if it already is happening, I know of people who've already received some letters from their lenders saying that we think you're in the floodplain. And basically what you have at that point is 45 days to get insurance. And so if you get that letter, don't ignore it. Do not throw it away. Don't pretend like it just didn't happen. Your first call will be to your insurance provider to get the insurance, because you won't resolve the floodplain issue within 45 days. And if you don't get the insurance on your own, your lender is required to purchase insurance on your behalf, and it is more expensive doing that than going through the flood insurance program. So,
But if your home is at a correct elevation,
Yep.
then you,
Well, if so,
I mean,
if,
say you're one of these houses
Yep.
on the high bank of Whitefish. I
Yep.
mean, they're going to be
In the floodplain.
they're going to be in a floodplain?
they might say you are. So what's going to happen to lenders is that the lenders are going to err on the side of caution, because if it turns out that they don't require a structure that they have a current loan on, and they don't require that to have flood insurance, and then that gets damaged by a flood, they're going to get fined a large amount by FEMA for not requiring the flood insurance. So they're going to err on the side of caution and say pretty much the majority of people are going to get those letters saying, we think you need insurance, and if you don't require it, prove it to us by going through a list of options, and I'll show you what those options are right now.
Our planning and zoning put this memo together, and I think it's a really, really good letter. And I'm just going to keep one of these at my house, because guarantee we'll probably all get a call and say, hey, what's going on?
Is this information on the website?
That's going to be.
Will be, all
We're
right.
going to put it out there, so. And so, let's say, Brad, that you got a situation where you're up on the high banks, you're way up, and you get that letter, you're going to want to get the insurance first, and then prove that you're out, and then, because you won't be able to get basically, what you have to do is if you think you're not in the floodplain, there's a list of options in the middle of that second sheet I gave you, 1 through 6, of being able to show. And basically what it comes down to, it's called a LOMA. It's referred to as a letter of map amendment. And basically, there's a couple different ways that you can get a LOMA, but it requires you to basically show via information and data that you are not in the floodplain, and you send that off to FEMA. Then they process that, and then they'll send back a letter of map amendment to the city saying, yes, this property is not considered in the floodplain. And then your lender can take that and will be able to use that to say that you don't require, that you won't require to have the flood insurance. One thing I want to point out, really, it's really important to know that the floodplain with the planning and zoning and the flood insurance, they don't always meet. So you could build your building and meet all the requirements of the ordinance, and your lender could still require you to have insurance on that structure for flood insurance. So I just want, we don't control that end of it. All that we control on our end is making sure that they build to meet the ordinance that the state and the federal government requires. So, so if folks do get this letter, get insurance, that's the first thing you want to do. And then if you go through this list I've got up on the screen here, 1 through 6, the first thing you can do is you can go to the FEMA website and see if there's been a LOMA already done in your property. So any current LOMAs that are out there are available through the website. You can get that and submit it to your lender. You can ask your lender to come and do a manual review of your property. You can also come and print your own map through the Crow Wing County Interactive Map and give that to your lender, see if they'll accept that. Typically, they don't. They're going to want to see something that's going to come from the city as far as that. The other option you have is number 5, is that you can, a LOMA out is shown, so like the situation, Brad, you refer to where, you're 25 feet above the water. We have really good data on our mapping where it shows topography and that, and the city staff can put together a LOMA out as shown and provide that to you, and then you can send it off to FEMA and see if they'll accept that. The last option that you have, if all those other options aren't really going to get you what you need, is to actually hire a surveyor to come out and do a elevation certificate and file that paperwork with the federal government. So,
So if you had a certificate of survey on your property, though, would that?
I
No?
doubt it, because they typically aren't you're gonna have a boundary survey done, but you're not gonna have an elevation done of your house to show what your lowest floor is at compared to the floodplain. So, it's just, it's a big change. It's a big change coming down.
Is there a figure of what they consider the floodplain versus the normal pool level of the Whitefish chain?
Typically,
Is there a
what
piece
you-
of information like that?
Yeah, typically what you're going to see is that every lake's going to have its own base flood elevation, but typically,
Don't they know that water seeks its own level in the case of the
generally
Whitefish
speaking,
chain?
the base flood elevation is 1.5 feet above your regulatory pool elevation, and your regulatory flood protection elevation is 1.5 feet above that, so it's about a 3-foot. It's about a 3-foot difference between the OHW and to where that flood protection elevation is, and that's kind of where but they've been doing this study since 2011, and so they've looked at a lot of data points. We've given them some feedback, saying that, they gave us some preliminary maps, and we said, you might want to look at this because we don't think that's right. So they've made some changes, but not as many as you might have hoped. So more than anything, I guess, I just really wanted to get this out there in the public so people are aware. They're going to get these letters. The letters from the lenders only apply if you have a mortgage. If you don't have a mortgage, you're not going to get this, you won't be getting this letter, and you won't be required to have the flood insurance,
So basically, if you live on a lake, you're out of luck.
pretty much.
Well put, thank you.
But I think the bottom line is that if you do think that you're out and you're not in the floodplain, the key is to get a surveyor out there and to get that elevation certificate shot, because it's going to cost you probably $1,000 to get that done, and flood insurance is going to probably cost you thousands. So, the return on your investment of getting that done, if you are actually out of the floodplain, will be a benefit to you, so.
Thousands.
Yeah.
So is there going to be a map on the website?
There is right now. Yep,
Okay.
there's a map out there. It's on, Crow Wing County has an interactive GIS site online, and the information's out there. It's on our free site. If people want to come in and talk to John and Cheryl at the counter, they can pop up the layer, see how it affects their property, and.
Can you just add your address? Or
Yep.
input your address?
It's
and
just,
it'll-
it's the same GIS that we have now through the county, and this is just an additional layer
Oh,
that you can
okay.
click on that will create polygons on your property to show where you at in relation to the, to the floodplain. So it's going to have a significant impact on people, and And that's why I want everybody, at least you guys to be aware, so if you start getting questions and that, you would, understand, what's going on. And always feel free to contact myself, John or Cheryl, if you have any questions. So this floodplain analysis didn't only happen in Cross Lake, but it happened countywide. So it's happening across the board for all the cities and for the county itself, and having to readjust and calibrate how we do these operations for permitting along the shorelines. This floodplain is having a dramatic impact on other lakes in the county, as well as what's happening up here in Cross Lake. Are there any questions on that?
Thank you, Chris.
The last thing I have, I know it's not on the agenda, but I just got this in the mail today. I thought you guys might want to see it. This came from a gentleman who sent an email to the county this morning and had used the Cross Lake decontamination unit, and I just thought this would be worth to get out there for the public to see. And I'll just read it. It's just a couple of sentences. So it says that I used the Cross Lake decontamination unit on Saturday late in the afternoon, and I had just returned from Lake of the Woods and wanted to make sure my boat was clean before I returned it to Kimball Lake. I was very impressed with the way the service was performed by the attendant. He was well trained and very thorough. He was also very respectful of my boat and did nothing that would have damaged it. I was really impressed when he got on the creeper to inspect the bottom of the boat and hard to see places on the trailer. Thanks for providing the service. This will help prevent the spread of AIS going forward as more people find out how easy it is to get their boats properly cleaned. And so for those who don't know, that's just south of town here at the Public Works Building. Open on the weekends, Thursday through Sunday, during the day hours, 8 to 5. No cost to stop on and get your boat decontaminated, and there'll be staff there that'll be more than willing to help you out with that. So appreciate the working with Cross Lake on that over the years of having that be the location. I know we've worked a lot with Ted and his staff on helping us maintain that and get the buildings set up and that, so I really appreciate that. I think it's just a good example of another partnership between the county and Cross Lake, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on to public safety.
Good evening. As you recall, last month we had a citizen come forward and had some concerns about the safety of the West Shore Drive public access. Since that point in time, Ted and his crew have been out there. They cleaned up the ditches, the road right away, so vehicles could get over further and park with their trailers. We do have no parking signs that limit parking away from driveways there. Ted's crew also, the stripers were in town, and so we talked about it. We had them stripe the crosswalk across West Shore Drive. Beyond that, I don't know what else we can do, barring people from parking along West Shore Drive at all. I mean, that's council's decision. We can put, when you're talking 2, 3, most 4 weekends a year where that gets very crowded, where they are parking along West Shore Drive and in a lot of vehicles out there, and I'm sure there's probably a Saturday or 2 where they're having a fishing tournament also. But I'll take direction from the council if there's something else that you want to do. We can put the radar signs, which, by the way, we've now, I think Ted told me today that we received the other 2 that will be going up hopefully on Daggett Pine Road later on this week. But we can put the radar signs up there on the busy weekends. Ted's got to put some posts up so that we can mount the signs on either side. But again, it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone, so I can't restrict them beyond that.
Well, you could put no parking signs, couldn't you?
We could put no parking signs along
For a
West
quarter
Shore
of a
Drive.
mile or
Well,
something?
I mean, if we're going to tell people we're going to put no parking signs there because the parking lot's full, are we going to do the same thing at a couple other establishments along the 66 here? I mean, where do we stop on that? And that would be my question to you.
Should we see how this works for a while, and if that citizen comes back and says that it isn't working, then we can address it again, and try the 30-mile-an-hour blinker just to have people aware?
we can do that. The other thing, you know, there are no shoulders on that road, so you can't impede traffic on the road. So nobody should be parking on the pavement anywhere. You know, we could put up no parking on pavement signs, I mean, but, you know, we're just adding to the confusion. We're putting more signs and more signs, so,
The risk that you're doing, though, is there's a parking lot for a recreation area, encouraging people to park on one side of the road and go down and get in the boat on the other. And I would hate to see a little kid or somebody get killed there. So, and granted, that's true in a lot of places, there's no question about it. That's just on a curve, that's on kind of a,
A
I don't
hill,
know.
it's on a hill, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of been warned. And if something happens, I'd sure hate to.
So what would your suggestion be, Dave?
I think no parking signs, within a couple blocks or something each way of it, because the visibility is bad there. Somebody's gonna. You know, I mean, that's just mine, I don't know.
Gary? Any comments?
I have no comment on that.
Dave Schrupp?
Ted, could we put parking signs up beyond Maroda? And then down beyond, to the south, beyond Sunset, or Sunrise Island?
You can put no parking on both sides of the road.
I think there is no parking on the west side.
Yeah. One thing we did is, it was about 2 years ago, we brushed it out. We had a complaint 2 or 3 years ago. We brushed it out at that time and increased the visibility. Since we were out there and brushed it here 3 weeks ago, I think if you went by it today, you'd be quite surprised on how much more visibility there is and how much, you know, you can see better.
The trouble
We did
is, if
create
you got
more
a
parking
vehicle
on the
there and a kid, I mean, I had 4
Yeah,
kids, so I
it's-
have 4 kids, and I know how that you can't keep your hands on them.
Yep,
And it happens way too fast, and if you can't see them, you can't see them.
don't disagree with you a bit.
Yeah, so I, you know, caution on the side of, I mean, you know, put them up, slow them down. It's a bad corner, you know, there's just, the whole thing's bad, so
It was,
that would be my vote.
personally, it was a bad design to have the parking lot on one side and the access.
It's a
on the
big
other.
parking lot, though, there's a lot of people there, and, you know,
Brad?
Well, now you're jumping into the whole parking situation.
Yeah,
Here's a
no, I know.
conversation for you. Okay, now, let's be honest. Let's put the churches in there. Let's put the bars in there. Let's put the bait box in there. I'm just gonna be bold. I told you earlier, I'm the only one that's got a parking lot that's of the correct size for its business in the whole darn town. You wanna start this parking issue, let's roll.
I just think that when
I'm
you're,
just saying, yeah, I
you're
mentioned
grabbing
that.
the cooler and you're putting the boat, you
But I
forgot the
mentioned like that,
keys,
that
and
lot across
everybody's running.
from the ice cream shop, you know, where everybody runs to look at the cars.
Totally
I mean,
get
I'll give you just as many examples that are just as bad. You know, and I don't care about the public access, I have my own access. I mean, this has nothing to do with me being in the boat business. I mean, people that go in and out of there, I'm just saying, you want to get into this parking issue, then let's get into the parking issue, and then we're going to bring in churches, we're going to bring in businesses, we're going to bring in everybody. So you open up that parking thing, parking on the road, let's start talking about parking on the road.
I still would hate to hear of a little kid getting.
Well,
hit out
I
there.
would too, but what if it happens in Cross Lake? What if it happens at,
Well, that's
you know,
true.
I mean, it can happen anywhere. You know, we just can't say, well, somebody could get killed there, well, somebody could get killed by lightning. I mean, you know, I don't buy into that.
I've spoken my piece.
Yeah, well, and I agree with what you're saying, Dave. I'm just saying that, you know, I mean, I know where you're coming from, but I'm just saying, you want to get into this parking thing, then let's get into the parking thing.
Yeah.
You know, then you got to have ordinances for towing, you got to have an impound lot, you got to, then let's take care of the parking problem, but it's
I
going
think
to
you're
be.
getting a little
it's gonna be-
carried away with it.
Well, I don't think so.
So right
As he
now-
said, but we're dealing with once again, we're dealing with a half a dozen weekends a year.
Sure,
Let's
if the
check
rest
it
of
out
the
on
time
January
Nobody's parking
11th.
in the parking lot, you don't have the problem, because
Right.
they're parking in the parking lot.
Right, but I mean.
So right now,
so, you know,
let's
that's all I'm
continue,
saying.
let's continue on with what you've already done.
Okay.
And see, and just monitor it. And I would certainly be in favor of a blinker, because we learned at a feasibility study that that's one of the best ways for people to become mindful of stopping, you know, of watching.
Right, and again, I want to caution you on that. That's only
Okay.
slowing them down to 30 miles an hour.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right.
so coming through that area, that's still fast. I don't know what the ordinance or what the statutes are regarding slowing them down beyond that, but I don't know that it would qualify for something like that for the public access. If the council pleases, if
What
Ted
about
and
if we
I-
put PED crossing, pedestrian crossing?
well, I think that's, well.
But just, you just
crosswalk,
did stripes.
But we're gonna sign it too.
Oh, you're going to sign it too?
Yes. There's-
Why don't we put one on the exchange lot, because there's a whole lot more kids running around the ice cream store. That's gonna happen. See? There needs to be something like Brent said. I mean,
No,
you
I
gotta
totally
pick your.
agree.
Yeah,
Right?
okay, so,
Can't just
For-
pick
for
one
now,
and.
if
so
the council-
parking will be another long-term discussion at some point. Let's get this one resolved right
I'm gonna be on
now.
vacation that day. If the council pleases, Ted and I will come up with a plan. We'll take a look and we'll put no parking, a block on either side, so that where there is crossing, coming from the
Nobody's there.
parking lot or anything like that, of course, yeah, we'll keep it back from the access on either side of the curve. If that.
Yeah,
pleases
that
the
would,
council, we'll
sense,
do
yeah.
that.
that would
Yep.
help.
Sounds good.
No
lot.
parking on either side.
You boys handle that.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
We're on it. Thank you.
Next is park and library update, park and rec update.
You just, full can of worms.
Good evening.
Hi,
Hello,
John.
John.
An
Good to see
update
you.
on some of our programs here tonight. The book sale report, our last book sale produced about $1,200 in revenue, and our next sale is scheduled for Friday, September 1st. And the volunteers want to add an additional day since it's Labor Day weekend, so we're going to be open Saturday too, 10 to 1 on Saturday, September 2nd.
Hey, just out of curiosity, how much have you guys raised so far on having those book sales spread out instead of having the one humongous one?
Yep, we're on pace to about the same revenue as we did
Same revenue?
with the one
And
sale,
much less
so-
work?
Much less work, yeah. The volunteers are very happy, so that was a
Great.
good change. Whitefish Warrior update, we had our second annual event here a couple weeks ago. We had 83 participants. We're already planning for next year's event, and I'd like to thank our sponsors and volunteers and our participants. Sponsors included Moonlight Bay, Cross Lake Drug, Mosquito Squad, Wind, Water, and Wheels, The Crossfire, Brainerd Public Schools, Northland Press, Cross Lake Public Works, and our Parks Maintenance guys that all work together to make that happen. So thank you for everyone for that event. It's PAL's biggest fundraiser of the year. Soccer programs, we have programs available from kindergarten through 12th grade, so parents can get registered at the community center right now. Cross Lake Conversations, we talked about having an update on the Blue Zones report and the walkability study that was just recently completed. We're going to set a date for that and have more information in the local papers on when we'll get together to have that findings report. Zumba class, we're starting a Zumba class at the community center. We have 2 free introductory classes scheduled on Tuesday, August 22nd from 5:30 to 7, and also Saturday, August 26th from 8:30 to 10. So you can come and try the class. It is free, and that's a new offering for us at the community center. Community center schedule for Labor Day, we will be closed Monday, September 4th. And we are working on a new to Medicare class. Senior Linkage Line and the Cross Lake Community Center have teamed up to offer this new program at the community center Friday, September 8th from 9:30 to noon. To register, you can call the Senior Linkage Line at 1-800-333-2433. So also working on a grant to build a little office inside the community center where we can do different one-on-one programs. We've talked about some senior classes on how to use computers, iPads. We've had a lot of requests come in from seniors that just don't know how to use those devices. So we're looking at doing a grant to Crowing Power and also work with the local Lions Club to raise the money to to build the office in the lobby. We're going to use part of the, one of our locker rooms for that. And this will also be used for any seniors that need to come in and get free help with their Medicare or any other programs that we have. It'll be a good community resource for us, I think. So we're just starting that project. Just worked on that today with the Lions and also with Senior Linkage Line. Another AAA class coming up. It's a refresher class on August 24th from 9 to 1. Call AAA to register for that class. And our trail rides, just to remind the public, we give free trail rides every Wednesday at 10, 11, and noon. They've been filling up fast, so if you'd like to take advantage of that tour, please give us a call and get on the reservation list. And last but not least, I want to mention, send a thank you out to the local Lions Club. The Cross Lake Ideal Lions added 3 fans to our Lions Picnic Shelter at the community center. And that was a project that was led by Doreen Galloway, and really a nice addition to the community center at no cost to the community. So that is my report for tonight, unless you have any questions.
Any questions for John? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Next is Public Works.
Good evening. Hopefully this will go quickly for us. We've all been here about an hour and a half, and it's getting to be late. First one, we have an agreement between City of Cross Lake and Crosswoods Development. With the attorney's help, we've drafted this agreement to take over maintenance of the roads. Attached to this, we've added a map. So what we'd be looking at is the main Osland, Gould, and Allen Avenues, along with Heritage Way. This one here is, what did you call it? Heath. As they want to name this one Heath. Heath Avenue, and this one yet is to be determined at some other date. But those would be what we'd be adding to the maintenance program. We would not be doing any of the sidewalks, so we'd be accepting maintenance up for the roads and taking over the roads for as far as plowing and maintaining, patching, striping, things associated with that. I've met with Mr. Anderson, so has Mike, the city administrator, myself, and I think we're in agreement that we could move forward with this. There was a motion from the Public Works to move forward with it.
Is Allen Avenue, is that basically a parking area?
No, that's a
Is
street,
that?
That's the front side.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
This would be the Bruce Larson's office right here in the corner.
Okay, so then what's the dark green behind it, where the parking is?
That is the
private?
that's the alley, and what they're changing the use of the businesses. I guess, I don't know if can I share this, Leah? Yeah. Okay, this piece between the drugstore and Rafferty's, some of those businesses are going to be, the buildings or office space is going to be split in half, and there's going to be storefronts to the back. So the back of the building will actually become frontage for smaller retail or professional services, whether it be, counseling or whatever that's going to go into these spaces. So this street here being named and maintained as a regular street, it's not considered an alley anymore, it's more of a street now, so.
So is that part of the maintenance that the city
Yes.
has taken over?
Yes. Everything that's highlighted that we're taking over as maintenance,
Okay.
excluding the sidewalks.
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Take
second.
it over.
Is there any further discussion? First by Gary, second by Brad Nelson?
This motion is to approve it, right?
Yes,
Yes.
correct. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Next item that I have on the agenda is to hire Ritter and Ritter Sewer Services. They're out of Aiken, Minnesota. We have been doing about a third of the town and rotating through the community ourselves, but the mains are getting to the point they need a really thorough cleaning with the big jetter unit and the vacuum unit, and that's what these people do. They come in and they jet the whole system and clean the whole system up. We're in a time crunch this year. We just don't have the time to get everything done. So this would facilitate us getting everything done in a timely manner. $17,800 is what they've quoted us for the 25,000 feet plus the 7 lift stations. And that was a motion also from the Public Works to go forward with this, so.
So there's a recommendation from.
How often do you have to do that?
We should, you should do every part of the system every third year.
And is this all the system?
This, I'm
or is-
doing the whole system, because just to get caught up, it's been 15 years to do a thorough cleaning of the whole system.
So
and
it's
we've
going
done-
to be about $6,000 a year to do it? If you do a third,
we
third,
usually-
third?
We usually do the smaller bit ourselves. We just don't, we don't have the time this year. With
Yeah.
everything else going on, I just don't have the time to get it done.
And you have done it, but now you're not, so they're going to
Yep.
do it, yeah.
And recommended by Public Works, correct?
Yes, it was.
So is there a motion on the floor to accept the request for Ritter and Ritter from Public Works for $17,008?
So moved.
Second.
First, Dave Schrupp, second, Gary Hecox. All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Item C is the wastewater treatment plant. We opened the bids. I think you're all aware how the bids came out. At this time, I guess it is to award the bids to our low contractor and move forward with this is where we're at. That was the motion by Public Works. Well, I guess it wasn't the motion by Public Works. I'll back up. Public Works, how do I want to say this, Mike?
I think they had options.
They didn't make a recommendation.
They didn't recommendation.
They passed that decision on to the council.
Yeah, because they weren't comfortable with the overbid.
And the council talked about that at the budgeting thing, and we're going to continue to talk about it. But the consensus was to go ahead and do it and to figure out how to pay for it as the, right?
As the budget talks continue.
Yeah. So I'll
So
make that
we're-
motion.
Okay, so is the motion to select one of these or just to,
Award the contract to the low
Lowest
bidder.
bidder.
Yeah.
Did you make a motion?
I did, yeah.
I'll second.
okay, there is a motion on the floor by Dave Nevin, second by Brad Nelson. Is there any further discussion? We had a budget meeting last Monday night, and this was discussed in depth. Obviously, I think most of us were in for a big surprise with the bids that were coming back. However, and Ted, you're better to speak to this than I am. This is something that we need to do. And so it puts a little bit different spin on how we were going to budget for this year, but
Yeah, with the
You wanna-
way,
that's our problem.
with the way our community has changed and our flows have changed, I don't think anybody had the crystal ball to see this coming. In my 30-plus years of doing this, I've never seen these kind of fluctuations and flows. A testament how many people are here and how many people are sticking around and how they're enjoying our community and hopefully moving to our community. But this is one of the repairs or improvements we have to do to keep going this way.
But Mayor, I think to continue what you're saying there, maybe you should just say what the numbers are and how we're planning on doing it, letting the people know about it in case
Ted,
they
do you
want
want to review that with the audience?
Well, on the back of the sheet, we have the bid tabulations. Eagle Construction was $2,227,000. Gritter Construction, $2,347,000. M&M Mechanical Solutions, $2,375,000. McGee, I can't even say the name, $2,375,400. Rice Lake, $2,699,400. The estimate was about 1.5.
And now it's about 2.5
Yeah.
with engineering fees. And so I'm going to go and put the monkey out of his bag and say that instead of, we're going to take some of the sale of the Cross Lake Communication and pay for a good portion of it is the way we're talking at the budget meetings now, instead of increasing the levy. So I think it's important everybody know that in case they got some input.
And we don't have any choice.
Yeah, I mean, we got to do it.
You know, we've got to fix the
So
place.
it's either
It's
increase,
not-
you know,
it's
charge
not
more
like
taxes or
deciding
take
on a
some
new
of that
truck or
money.
something here.
So, Shar, just to review, we have a motion on the floor, first and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Council, Mayor, the last item I've got two more things. The sidewalks here at City Hall are becoming unlevel, they're starting to deteriorate after the 20-plus years. We've gotten two quotes, one for $10,117 from Colonial Masonry, and then I got a second one from Buster Masonry for $12,064.50 to come in, and that's with the city staff, or my staff, Public Works, removing the existing sidewalks, and these guys come in and installing the new sidewalks.
Where's Buster Concrete out of?
He is out of Breezy Point. We've used him for a couple little projects before.
So we need a motion on the floor to replace the cement sidewalks.
I'll make that, are you going to use Colonial?
You would use the low bidder,
All right,
yes.
I'll make the motion, we use Colonial to
Dave Schrupp?
replace the sidewalks.
Dave Shupp first. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Is that the patio out in front of the building too? Is that
Front
considered a
and back
sidewalk?
sidewalks, yes.
Any other further discussion or questions? All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Council and Mayor, this was another discussion that was at our budget meeting. Our current building that the county and the city utilize for storing salt and sand and salt materials has leaning to the north about 6 inches on the west corner. On the other corner, it's leaning to about 2.5 inches. I thought I would have for you tonight a recommendation where to go, but I received some more information at 4 o'clock and then just before the meeting, and I need to talk to Mike before I bring it to you on some direction. So hopefully I would have this for your budget meeting, if that's allowable, that you could maybe take action at that time.
Sure.
This is another building that's, we'll be filling this building, or need to fill this building in about 2 months with product for the upcoming winter, so it needs to get repaired.
So I'm going to recommend that we table the motion on the floor and discuss further at our budget meeting on Monday, the 21st.
That's fine.
Does
Fine.
that sound fine? Okay.
The only other thing is just a quick update on the bridge. There is 6 or 7 plan holders on the bridge project. It's out for bids right now, that you guys had the special meeting on and authorized us to proceed with that. Tamarack is ready for blacktop and Anchor Point. They were putting Class 5 on it today, so we're getting closer. As soon as they're done with Anchor Point, they'll be moving over to Melinda Shores, and we should be still on track, weather permitting, to be done before the next big holiday.
Perfect. Perfect.
With that, I have nothing else unless you have something for me.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
You're just a financial breath of fresh air tonight, Ted.
Remember, I apologized at the meeting.
He did. He did.
I said sorry to everybody. Like I said, I was sick when we opened the bids, so.
Brad Person, do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, the only thing is actually a request to go into closed session. We have a counteroffer on the bridge project to review. So we could adjourn to that at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Okay. So do we need a motion on that to adjourn to move? Okay.
Yes.
I'll make one.
Okay.
Do you want to finish the other items and then
Oh,
before you adjourn?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Okay. So then we'll go into our public forum. Again, no action will be taken on any of the issues raised. If appropriate, the issues be placed on the agenda of a future council meeting. Speaker must state their name and address. Each speaker is given 3 minutes time limit. Anything from the audience?
My name is Tim Berg. I live at 11905 County Road 16. Been a resident of Cross Lake for 29 years, of which I've actually lived in the town for 25. I've been on the Public Works Committee just ending my 5th year. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't come up here and at least express to you, I hope we find a different way to budget the sewer problem other than using the $3 million that we got from the sale of the telecommunications company. One of the questions that I kind of had, and I came in and talked to the mayor and Mike earlier this week, was exactly how long have we had our hands on that money? Has it been 10 months or 11 months or 9 months? And my reason for asking that question is, what kind of investment or return could you get on that kind of money? And so I think, the answer that we settled on is you could do like a short-term 3-year, I think, fixed, and the average interest rate you could get on that was 3% of a quarter, or like 1%. And so I guess I bring this to your attention because we have a lot of things that we fund in this town. I know we just bought a new police car to support our police department, but I just think of $3 million at 1%, and that's $300,000 that we could have gotten a year. So if we've been sitting on that money for 10 months, my math isn't really awesome, but I'm just thinking that's $200,000 that we kind of just let go. So we talk about being upset, with with WSN because we saw shovels being held. We went to a different city engineer, and Public Works Committee voted unanimously to stay with WSN. And it was this board who chose to put a new perspective or a new set of eyes on our city plans. So again, I'm up here because it's disappointing, because when we talk about getting a new set of eyes, in 30-some years of doing this, Ted Strand had pointed out that he's never had a bid come in over what the actual bid projection was. In this case, it comes over almost $1 million, and this is their very first crack at a project for our city. So when I was at the meeting on Monday, it was kind of disheartening to hear the lack of anger in the voices, because I think you guys should be really upset. I know I did notice it with Councilman Schrupp. But I just don't think we should let these people off the hook. I think there should be some serious consideration taken into what we're going to do moving forward with Bolton and Mink. That's pretty much my piece. My main point is let's find a different way to pay for this. I know somewhere we can look into bonding $1.5 million and pay the rest with reserve funds. That came up. Something else. Just let's not worry about what the future people of the city, I agree with a council member here where we don't want to spend it on fluff and puff. But I believe that I'm kind of part of that future. And I think trying to figure out a way to make that $3 million work for you and work for the city, and finding a solution that would work long-term and not just thinking short-term, I just ask that you please take that into consideration when thinking about how we're going to pay for this. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim?
Thank you, Tim. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Now we will entertain a motion to adjourn to a special meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Dave Schrupp first, Gary Heacock second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.